Hello and welcome. I'm just going to jump right in. This is one of many of my live garden classes that I do here on YouTube only. The topic of today's class is everything spring gardening. So we're going to talk about spring garden planning, how I stay organized, how I make sure I don't miss some seed packets or something like that. And just how do I sow tons of seeds for tons of things? I am a nursery and I sell seeds on my website. So I literally start hundreds and hundreds of things from seed every, in preparation of my spring garden. So I definitely have some methods and techniques to make that process easier. Maybe you're not sowing as many things as I am, but regardless, these techniques and methods are helpful no matter, the level of gardening that you're doing. Hello and welcome. Just getting started here. This is one of my many live classes. It's a great way for me to kind of connect more with you guys and answer your questions in real time, and also show you guys what am I doing? Like, what am I doing right now? It's December 17th. What am I doing to spring? Because that's the whole month of December. It's sowing all my seeds and getting ready for spring gardening. Just a couple things. If you're new here, I love to answer your questions. Maybe you're going through something right now in your garden, you just don't know what to do about it, whatever that might be. Just make sure if you ask a question that you put what state you're in and your zone, so I can kind of understand your climate a little bit better. And just a couple reminders before we get started. Like I was saying earlier, this is a spring garden planning and seed sowing class, so there's a lot of things I need to cover. I'm going to be showing you guys all of my setup here as a professional, nursery and everything. Like, what do I do? Because you can definitely take from this and apply it at home. And I'm going to show you all my supplies, my setup, my recommendations, so you get the best germination. How do you start planting? All the seeds and stuff that you need to, start growing. And then lastly, we'll talk about, lastly, I'm going to show you guys seed sowing. Like, I'm going to take some examples of different crops and show you, because it depends what you're trying to grow. The way you're going to sow seeds for that is going to be a little bit different. And just so you know, if you ask a question or something, I don't see it right away because I actually have to click here on YouTube, the chat button, to look at the chat. So every now and then I might reach over to check the chat. But I definitely love answering your questions. So feel free to, say something if you need to. But anyways, let's, before we begin, just some reminders. These classes are kind of random. It all depends what I'm doing in my garden at that time, if there's something I can teach. So it's not something planned. It's not something where I have a schedule in advance or something like that. The best way to find out about them is to be part of my email group. So if you go to my website, jarasgarden.com, the top of the website, there's a button that says email newsletter or email group, something like that. And you just submit your email there. Those are the first people that know the dates and times for all of my classes. Every class is a different theme. It's also the first people to know when things are restocked, because I have some items that just sell out like in minutes. I had some tomato seeds sell out in minutes before while I was teaching a class. So things can go quickly. A lot of people want to be notified ahead of time before I start announcing it all over social media. So join the email newsletter group if you haven't already, because they're the first to know about that. Any sales, which, by the way, I am doing a spring garden sale right now. All seeds and plants on my website are discounted. The discount is automatic. You'll see it reflected at checkout, and that sale ends on Wednesday, this Wednesday, December 20th. So it's a good opportunity to stock up on really unique seeds and plants, the same stuff I grow here in my garden. So if you see a plant or a tomato or whatever in my videos and you want to grow the same thing, most likely I have seeds or plants on my website. So yeah, let's get started then with this class. Like I said, we have a lot of information to cover. The very first thing you need to do is know your last spring frost date. You should know your first winter frost date as well. But right now, the main focus is you have to know your last spring frost date, because that is going to dictate your whole schedule for sowing your seeds for spring. So if you don't know what it is and you need some help, there's a couple websites you can go check out, like Farmer's Almanac. That's pretty standard. A lot of people know about that one. Or you can try another website called plantmaps.com. You put in your zip code and it'll tell you, an average, a couple days or so, plus or minus, of when your last spring frost date is. I see some questions. Hold on. I would like to know the best tomatoes to grow and when and how. Well, I'm definitely going to be talking about tomatoes today. The best tomatoes for Florida, there's nothing special. There's no varieties that I'm going to say grow better here in Florida than they do up north. In my experience, and I love tomatoes, are my favorite thing to grow. I grow hundreds of them every year. You definitely want to focus maybe on more heat tolerant ones. Some of them, in my opinion, are maybe a little more heat tolerant, especially the ones that have anthracyacids or darker coloration. So, and that goes for the majority of vegetables, regardless if they're purple, if they're blue, if they're called black, like a black tomato, for example, Black Beauty or something like that. For whatever reason, I feel in my experience that the darker colored vegetables are more heat tolerant. So start with that. And then it's always just smart to pick out early maturing cultivars, because we have such a high disease and pest pressure, and then the heat just arrives so quickly here, and it's the heat that kills off my tomato plants, not the winter cold or none of that. I'm actually growing right now is like the best time to grow tomatoes. Right now I'm harvesting tomatoes right in the middle of December, and I'm going to be planting more in January with the seeds that we're sowing in this class. So so early maturing varieties, because you have early, mid, and late season. So try to pick the early ones. And also try to pick determinates, because they start producing earlier than the indeterminates, and they put their whole harvest on. Usually it's one big flush, and then you might get another second big flush, but it's like all together. So you just harvest them all out, because indeterminates, they'll produce like a little bit here, stop growing. They'll start growing again, produce a little bit here, stop growing, start growing again, and produce again. Like it's like a segmented type thing, if that makes sense. Whereas the indeterminates kind of put them all at once, they'll stop growing, and then a little bit later you'll get maybe a second flush. Not as good as the first flush, but it's a second flush. So I've been finding those tactics, or those selections, really help out when you're in a high heat, high pest, and high disease climate. So that's, and I got a wide variety of tomatoes on my website, and I definitely explain if they're determinate, indeterminate, or whatever. So 10A has no frost date. So do we plant whatever? 10A does have a frost date. I am 10A. I used to be 9B, and with the updated zone, I am now considered 10A. I don't know if you're in Florida. That's why I say the state, because 10A in Florida is not the same as 10A in Texas or 10A in California. The only thing that zones tell you is how cold of a temperature you may potentially experience in any given winter. But my first frost date where I start hitting like 30s is the very end of December. Whereas maybe someone in Texas or California might be a little earlier than that. It varies slightly with that. But 10A, Florida, I hate having to do this, but I have to open up the chat. Yes, definitely Florida has a heat problem. We're not concerned about the cold. Florida, okay, so you're like me, Nancy. By the way, hello. Nancy, you're like me. We definitely do have a last frost date, but it's not 30s, okay? Like normally we'll get a cold front of like 30s, freezing, potential of freezing, the very end of December. And then I'll notice maybe at least one more in January, maybe a second one in January, just depends how cold our winter is. And then that's it. And then we get another like cold front frost, usually at the beginning or the middle of February. And then we're like good to go. Like that's it. But that February one is usually not temperatures in the 30s. It's usually like 40s or something like that. So the majority of your plants are going to be fine. But we typically get 2-3 nights out of the whole winter season where it's freezing. So, but what I do is I think the second week of February, that whole section is typically the last frost, or not frost is considered when temperatures are in 30s, but normally it's not 30, it's like 40, something like that. And then we're good to go. We normally don't get more like cold fronts like that unless it's an unusually cold winter or a little bit longer winter. But then that's kind of like my target. My last spring frost date is around that second week of February. So that's my target date for counting back when I need to start sowing my seeds. So this whole class is based on what your last spring frost date is. So if you're not sure, go check out, go Google it, whatever you got to do, and go find that out. So next, and I know some of you aren't in Florida. Maybe your last spring frost dates are March or April, May, whatever. You can still watch this class and get ideas for your spring garden. I'm a little ahead of you, obviously, maybe a couple weeks or a couple months. But the techniques and everything I'm showing you is exactly the same for everyone. How to grow something is the same for everyone, no matter where you're located. It's the timing that's going to be different. So anyways, I always have notes here, guys, because I get so sidetracked sometimes. But all right, so we know our last spring frost date. Let's start preparing and organizing, our seed sowing schedule. So the first thing, you need to clear out your garden. All right, clean out your spaces, build new structures, whatever you want to do. If maybe you're just getting started, you're brand new. I recommend that you clean out, prepare the garden space first before you start sowing seeds, before you buy plants and all that. You want to make sure that you know more or less the space that you're dealing with, because you don't want to like buy hundreds of seeds and then you only have space for like a couple plants. So I recommend, clean out the garden, get that section prepared first before you start planting anything else. And there's so many ways that you can maximize your garden space. If you're a small garden like me, adding grow bags has helped me like double my gardening space, because I can stick them in like weird corners and parts of my garden where maybe I can't like build an actual garden bed or something because of the size of that space, but I can squeeze in some grow bags here and there. So that helps a lot. And obviously vertical gardening as much as you can, especially if you're in Florida and any high disease pest areas. Vertical gardening will pick your plants up off the ground. It helps the leaves dry faster, which means less diseases. And it also makes it harder for pests to get on them, especially the worms. So I have lots of vertical gardening systems, all different kinds. Get creative. There's so many ways that you can do that. The next thing, after you've got your garden space done, okay, is, well, if you want to go this far, this is how I am, though. This is how I plan stuff. I make a map of my garden. So this was my fall garden, actually. So these are each of my beds, and I use, I think this is called graphing paper, because I kind of follow square foot gardening guidelines, which dictates pretty much how many of each crop, how many plants of that crop you could fit in one little square foot, right? So like tomatoes, you plant one every square foot. Same thing with peppers. Beans, like bush beans, you can put 9 seeds in 1 square foot. That is a good guideline to start out with, but I'm just going to tell you, I probably cramp things in a little closer than that, especially if you're a home backyard gardener and you have rich soil and you're fertilizing. They don't compete with each other as much as what everyone thinks they do. But, that's once you get more experience with growing certain things that you'll start figuring that out. But to get started, square foot gardening guidelines is a great point of start. So I draw, my garden, kind of rough sketch it. I even put circles for my grow bags and stuff like that. And every 4 squares, every square made out of 4 little cubes is 1 square foot. So that's how I can kind of visualize, all right, I'm going to put all my tomatoes here. I can fit 20 of them in a row. I need to sow seeds for 20 tomato plants. So I'm not like sowing, hundreds of plants and then I have no space for them. And of course, always sow a little extra. You might have some seedlings that end up dying or a plant and you can pop in a new one. And I also highly recommend, I would like it if everyone did this, sow a tray or 2 extra of random things and donate it to like your local community gardens and stuff like that. That's what I'm doing this spring. So just, always starting extra plants is good. If you don't use it, someone else will, your friends. I would love it if my friend would give me free plants or just donate it. Okay, so let's you know, if you could do that, that's great for your community. But anyway, so garden map, this helps you visualize what you're dealing with, how much space you have, and kind of get a rough count of how many plants you need to be sowing from seed. Also, don't forget to amend your soils before you start planting. I'm not going to start planting anything for spring until the middle of January. Yes, the middle of January is when I start planting tomatoes and corn, because it just doesn't get cold enough in my area for that to really affect it. I mean, we might get a couple cold fronts. I know that with tomatoes, specifically the seedlings, they will die or get severely damaged if they're exposed to temperatures like in the 40s and 30s. So I'm prepared for that. I have row covers, or I'll just take like milk jugs and cut the top off, flip them over, and I'll take like landscape hooks and kind of secure them into the ground, and creates a mini greenhouse over my little tomato seedling. Or save your boxes from Amazon, from Christmas, whatever. I flip those over on top of my plants, and put some landscape hooks in there, because when we get a cold front, there's high winds. So that will just blow that stuff off. So I like to just put some landscape hooks in there to secure things. And you can also do the same thing with like melons, watermelons, cucumbers. You know, they grow really fast if you are able to direct sow them from seed instead of starting them, you know, from in containers or pots like in here. But some people need to do that because maybe you don't have a long growing season or something. So you're required. You have to start them a couple weeks before your last spring frost date. And that's fine. I've done that too. But I do notice a significant difference when I direct sow seeds for cucumbers, melons, and all that. They take off way faster than the stuff, you know, that I start from seed in pots. So to get an early and a head start on my garden, I will direct sow seeds for some cucumbers here and there. And then if a cold front comes, I'll throw, you know, a box or milk jug or row covers, whatever, over them, and they're good, right? That's for Florida anyways. If you're in a much colder climate, that might not cut it. So in that case, you know, start your seeds early indoors. Also, this was a game changer for me this year. I finally got around to installing a decent drip irrigation system. I got a kit from Drip Depot, and that has changed my whole garden. I cannot tell you how much of a big time saver it's been, because I also have an injection system that injects fertilizers in there. That alone has saved me so much time. I don't have to fertilize anymore. I don't have to water anymore. And now I can focus on other parts of my garden that maybe I've been struggling with because I just don't have time. And one of those is weeding. So usually at the end of summer, when I'm starting my fall garden, it's chaos because, you know, summer here in Florida, the rains and everything, the weeds are out of control. And so when I finally get around to, all right, I need to start clearing things out to prepare for fall, it's a nightmare. So now that I have a lot more time on my hands, I can dedicate, you know, some more time to weeding and just staying on top of that in general. So drip irrigation, I should have done that years ago. Huge difference in my life and my success as a gardener. And I do have a YouTube video tutorial about how I installed my drip irrigation system. I went through every piece, showed you how I did it. Because if I can do it, and I don't know anything about tools and building stuff and whatever, so can you, okay? No one helped me put it together. I was able to do it by myself in like an hour or two. It was so easy. Also, that reminds me, at the end of this class, this entire class will be uploaded to the live section of my YouTube channel. So if you missed my class or something, you had to go, you couldn't watch the whole thing or whatever, you can find it there. And I also send a summary email, you know, to, if you're, you know, part of my email group, to give you like a list of like all the stuff that I may have mentioned during class. So you don't have to worry about taking notes and whatever. I'll put links, anything that I mentioned in there, I'll just send it to you through email. Or any of the supplies I'm about to mention, I'll send it through email. And also, I'm wearing a mic today, so if the sound cuts off for some reason, please let me know. It's very windy today, and if I don't have a mic, like, it sounds like a little tornado in here. It's pretty bad. So let me know if the sound or, you know, the video quality, something happens, because that does happen time to time. All right, so now we're ready. We have our garden ready. We drew our map. We know how many plants, or at least an estimate or idea of how many plants we need to start from seed. The next thing you need to do is gather your seeds and supplies, because if you wait until spring, to go out to the stores, to order your seeds, even from websites and stuff like that. Stuff very quickly goes out of stock or is just hard to find because the entire country is thinking about spring gardening at the same time. So if you want to make sure you grow a certain plant or get seeds for a certain type of tomato or whatever, go get your seeds right now. Do not wait until springtime to actually, get all of your supplies. Plus, a lot of the supplies is like on sale or clearance right now. It's in the middle of winter, so you might find some really good deals on fertilizers and stuff like that. So go gather everything, gather all your seeds. All right, so then the next thing that I do, once I have all my seeds and plants, I know what I'm going to be growing this season, I start organizing them. All the things that you can possibly start from seed in general take either like 4 weeks all the way up to maybe 12 weeks to be ready for transplant from starting it from seed. And I have a list on my website that breaks down all the crops. Like, for example, tomatoes, that takes 8 to 12 weeks. Lettuce, that takes like 4 weeks. So you kind of have a game plan and you can backtrack. All right, I'm starting seeds for tomatoes. I need to backtrack 8 to 12 weeks from my last spring frost date. So that list, I will also link it in that email as well when I send that to you guys. So you got all your seeds. I have all my tomato seeds, let's say. I put them all in front of me and I start separating them by how long it takes to be ready for transplant. So all the 4-week stuff here, all the 8-week stuff here, all the 12-week stuff here. And then I get these Ziploc bags. You can use boxes, like, whatever you want. And I'll label them for the month that I need to sow the seeds. So this is my baggie for December. These are a bunch of tomatoes that I still have to sow these seeds. So usually at the beginning of that month, I will get the bag and I will start sowing seeds. So it doesn't feel overwhelming. Everything's planned out for me. Then I have a bag for January. So this is the stuff I need to sow right now. This is the stuff that takes like 12 weeks to be ready for harvest. To be ready for transplant size. So anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks, because this is the stuff that I need to be sowing like in January or February. Then I have a bag for January. This is all the stuff that I will be sowing in January, around January 1st. And then I finally have this bag for February. And by February, I am now approaching my last spring frost date. I try to direct sow seeds as much as possible. If you can direct sow seeds for something, that is going to be way easier than starting a bunch of trays and cups and containers and maintaining all these seedlings and taking care of them and all that. Whenever you have the opportunity to direct sow seeds for something, go that route. So this is, by February, I'm passing my last spring frost date. I'm okay to start direct sowing seeds for tons of things. So this will be full of stuff like lettuce, cucumbers, melons, squash, zucchini, like all of those kinds of things that I prefer to direct sow from seed. So take all your seeds, your big pile, start separating them into baggies, and then you have your entire spring garden pretty much planned out for you. You don't have to go through your seeds over and over and try to remember again and again, like what do I start in January, what do I start in February, all that kind of stuff. It's already done, right? So this is how I also ensure I don't forget to sow seeds for something. So I still got to go through all my seeds and fill up these 2 baggies, but this is what's left for December. I had a lot of seeds for eggplants and peppers, but I pretty much got through all of those. So this is, like I said, I start seeds for hundreds of things, okay? And it can get very overwhelming. So what I like to do is, let's say, for example, December 1st came around, I pulled out my bag for December. I will say, all right, today I'm going to sow seeds for peppers. And then the next day, okay, today I'm going to sow seeds for eggplants. Then the next day, I'm going to sow seeds for tomatoes. So you're doing a little bit every day instead of sitting down at one time and it takes hours. Because it's not just sowing seeds, it's also filling up the cups with soil, getting them moist, setting up your grow lights or whatever. And I'll get more into that too. One weekend I might be like, okay, this weekend I'm going to set up all my grow lights and have everything ready. The next day, all right, I'm going to take all my cups and containers and I'm just going to fill them with soil and pre-moisten them. Then the next day I'll start some seeds. That's what works for me, because if I were to sit down and do this all at once, like I just don't have time like that. I'm very busy. I don't have time to like hours and hours and hours and hours of doing all of this at once. Maybe you do, and that works for you, then that's great. then you can definitely obviously do that. But for me, it's less overwhelming, and I end up being more successful when I divide all my garden tasks by, you know, a little bit every day. Like, what can I do in 15 minutes today in my garden? And then the next day, what can I do today for 15 minutes? And then all of a sudden, by the time you hit the weekend, a lot of your garden projects are done, like, and you can relax and enjoy your weekend. So that's kind of like, that's just how I do it. And you'd be surprised how much you can accomplish, you know, in just little 15-minute segments every day, like the end result. So that's kind of how I go about it, like figuring out, you know, sowing seeds and getting my schedule and just getting organized with it. Let me check the chat really quick, see if there's any questions. Oh, shoot, there are. How often can you reuse dirt in grow bags or raised beds? Thank you so much. I have a lot of grow bags. I go to Home Depot and I buy the cheapest compost I can possibly find. It's like a white bag with yellow labeling. I don't know the brand. Not every Home Depot carries that one though. So, you know, go check Lowe's as well. Some people have told me they find it at Lowe's. The point is though, I just buy the cheapest compost. I don't mix it with anything. I don't go buy special potting mix. I don't go buy like garden soil mixes and whatever. I just use compost. If you have a good quality compost that company has composted that down the, you know, required amount of time, it's fine. But if you buy compost that was not composted the length of time required to like break down everything, then your plants get burned. So that has happened. Some gardeners have told me, hey, I went and I bought compost and my plants just died or they got burned. That means that brand did not do their job correctly and it didn't compost long enough to break down so that it wouldn't be harsh on your plants, so to speak, and burn them. So try a different brand of compost or just try different soil if that happens. But I try to be as inexpensive as possible. So I fill my grow bags with the cheapest compost. Also, if you have debris like sticks, leaves, whatever, sometimes I'll cut down like my banana stalks. Oh, that is so much biomass that you could use to fill like the bottom of your containers, raised beds, grow bags, what have you, and then throw your dirt on top of that. So that way you save more money on dirt. And then and more specific to your question though, like how often do I change them out? I only change it if there's a problem. So usually that stuff lasts me like years. Obviously the level will compost down a little bit. I add some more, you know, every season, whatever I have to do. But unless there's a problem, unless there's like a nematode infestation in that grow bag soil, or I don't know, some kind of bug or bad disease or something, whatever that might be, then I might consider, okay, I need to like get rid of this soil. It's not good, or compost it down, heat it up, compost it down, and then you can reuse it. So yeah, you just have to make sure your compost pile gets hot enough to kill those pathogens, bugs, eggs of insects, like whatever that was, nematodes, for example, and then you can reuse it. But yeah, unless there's a problem, I keep using the same stuff. Let me check the questions again. How long do seeds last? So this depends on the crop and how it's stored. So for all seeds, no matter what it is, the best storage conditions are a cool, dry, dark place. No sunlight, no moisture. And you want like normal, like cold temperatures is better. Like seed banks and stuff like that, I think they maintain their temperatures like at 30s or 40s or something. I don't know, something very cold like that. I don't have a fridge or seed bank like that. So I just keep mine in a designated spot in my pantry that gets air conditioning because I'm in Florida, and I put all the seeds in bags and I put stuff in there to absorb extra moisture and just keep them really, you know, dry as possible and sealed and in the dark at room temperature, if that makes sense. And if you do that, some seeds have lasted like thousands of years. There's people that have got seeds out of like old caves and the pyramids even, and those seeds still germinated. So it just depends on the storage. Now, there are some crops that their seeds go bad, so to speak, sooner than others, like onion seeds. They don't last that long, even stored properly. Like, so if you bought a packet of onion seeds and they didn't germinate well for you, those seeds were probably old. That's the number one thing that I would think. Otherwise, you're good to go. So onion seeds, I would say a couple years. Tomato seeds also, they last longer than onion seeds, but they go bad faster than other types of crops is what I'm trying to say. So there are a little bit of differences, but the key is, the environment where you're storing them. And you'd be surprised. Some people say, hey, I found a package of 20-year-old tomato seeds and they germinated, they sprouted. So always try. I have remaining tomato seedlings that didn't go in yet, not enough space. Do you think they'll be okay to plant for spring? Oh, it disappeared before I could finish reading. It seems like my garden grows slower than yours, maybe more fertilizing. I'm definitely really on point with my fertilizer schedule and the type of fertilizer I use. When I started gardening, I was pretty much using just like fish emulsion and like blood meal and stuff like that. Fish emulsion is a really weak fertilizer. If you look at it, it says like 5. I don't know what the other quantities, but they're all really low. And it's organic. A lot of people like to use it. It's great if you want to make like compost tea or something like that, or even feed seedlings, because you can't feed like full strength fertilizers to seedlings or they'll burn. So fish emulsion is good for some things, but I don't think it's great for growing like fruiting crops, like vegetables at a larger scale. It will help, but it's not going to be as good as something like Espoma brand Garden Tone, where it's formulated, the amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are much higher. There's a lot of different organic sources that you can use, but depending on the crop, sometimes I use something synthetic. Very rarely will I ever use something synthetic, but like corn, for example, if you want to get like big, huge, nice big cobs of corn that are all filled out and just look amazing, like the grocery store ones or something, giving them like that synthetic fertilizers, like the 10-10-10s, 13-13-13 or whatever, or ammonium sulfate, nitrates, stuff like that, you'll see a huge difference by switching to that. But I don't use those kind of fertilizers much with the rest of my crops. I really like Espoma brand, organic granular fertilizers. I use their Garden Tone or Tomato Tone, whatever I could find. It's made a huge difference. And now that I have the fertilizer injection system, I'm using even some of the organic liquid fertilizers because I just pour it in there and it injects it through my system. So there's the type of fertilizer that I'm using and the frequency is definitely going to make a big change. I remember when I started gardening, I was trying to grow zucchini and I'm like, this is not doing anything. I was fertilizing it with fish emulsion and compost. I'm like, this isn't really doing anything. Like, this doesn't look that great. And it's just, they need more. They need more if you want them to grow to like their full potential and full capacity of production or whatever. You'll get something, but if you want to be like, wow, I had an amazing, oh my gosh, this zucchini plant gave me like 20 zucchinis. Like, you're not going to get that by using just a few inches of compost and fish emulsion, in my opinion, and in my experience. Okay. Oh, and I get so sidetracked. You asked me about your extra tomato seedlings. Yes, you can definitely plant those in spring. Just make sure they don't get root bound. So I don't know how big your container is, but if you like pull the seedling out and you see like there's a lot of roots since it's getting real tight, pot it up, because if it gets root bound, that's going to stunt its growth. It might recover from that if you just plant it in spring, but it's just better that you don't allow it to get root bound to begin with. So you might just have to like pot it up. I would say maybe once or twice, depending on when your last spring frost date is. And they'll be nice big plants for you. Keep them warm, keep them happy, because the cold will kill them as well. Have you found seedlings aren't good for planting after a while? Yes. So again, root bound is an issue. So for example, I find that seedlings for like brassicas, like the big broccolis, cauliflowers, stuff like that, if they get root bound, you'll start noticing they don't grow much. And you'll notice that when all of a sudden you take it and you plant it in the garden and it just takes off. And you're like, whoa, like this thing grew double its size in like 2 weeks. What happened? Well, it like knows. It knows it's in this pot. It knows it doesn't have a lot of space. And it knows when you put it into more space. I don't know if that sounds weird to you guys, but they know. The plants know, okay? It's like when you have a fish in a small fish tank and it stays tiny, and then you move it to a new fish tank and it gets really big. But I feel like broccolis and stuff like that are even more susceptible to that than something like tomatoes. Like tomatoes, if they get root bound, they most likely will recover and just take off anyways. But some of the other crops are a little bit more sensitive to that. But yeah, try not to get root bound though. Try to plant your things on time. That's why I say start with clearing out the garden and preparing it and having it ready, because I can't tell you how many times I started seeds first and I didn't have a space to put them in my garden, or it wasn't cleaned out and I didn't feel like getting around to cleaning it out. And then by the time I finally did, they've been sitting way longer in their pots than what is ideal. So I find I'm more successful and more on time if I have the garden ready first. I start my seeds and now I'm like, okay, they're ready. I can plant them. All right, I caught up on my questions. Let me continue with the class. So now we're going to get into my seed sowing setup. Now, I know this is a patio, but now it's like my whole greenhouse now. This might be most likely way more than what like you guys need, as a regular home gardener. I have 2 gardens. This is my home. It's a very small garden, but I have a second garden on a couple acres of land in St. Cloud. It's my aunt's property because my family, they kind of help me garden over there, and we have chickens and bees over there too. So, that's why I have so much. And I'm a plant nursery, so I've had to this is usually where I keep my inventory. I've had to cover everything because we're starting to get cold. So I don't know if you guys can see, but I just got a plastic tarp. These are shelves that I got from Sam's Club, by the way, right? I love these shelves, but they don't have like the plastic that comes with greenhouses because they're not greenhouses. So I just took like a old tarp I was using for solarizing, and I had to like finagle it around my shelves, because if I don't, there's a high risk that a lot of my inventory will die. So I had to like just wrap it all around here as best I could. So these shelving units are awesome. I don't know the dimensions, but Sam's Club, like if you walk into their store, they have them there on display. They're huge. They fit a lot here. You can definitely sow your seeds indoors. And that's actually what I used to solely just sow my seeds indoors. If it's cold outside, your spring stuff that you're sowing is not going to be happy. And that can stunt the growth of things, especially like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. Those are like, they need warmth or they get stunted. So if it's cold outside, do not put your seedlings outside. Like just set them out there, okay? Either bring them indoors, start them, have a section in your house. But I know a lot of people cannot do that. I used to do that, but my husband really didn't like that. So as I've been growing and expanding, I'm like, okay, I can't just bring all of this stuff indoors. I need to figure something out. So this year, I got a couple of these mini greenhouses from Amazon, and I'll put links in that email at the end of this class. And it comes with the plastic, it zips. But what I really love about this is that I can get a couple heat mats. Let me grab my heat mat here. And I get all of this stuff from Amazon, guys. So I get a couple heat mats like this. These are very inexpensive. I think like they're $12 or a pack of 2 for 20, something like that. And I put like 2 or 3 of them in here at the bottom, which is great because I'm starting seeds for tomatoes and peppers anyways. And if you use heat mats with those, they germinate much faster. Like to me, this is like a requirement for germinating tomatoes and especially peppers, because peppers take forever. They take forever. They take like 3 months to be transplant size, in my opinion, or where at least I like them. Whereas tomatoes, they take like 8 weeks or something like that. But having heat mats really helps them germinate fast. Actually, I just planted these Jimmy Nardello peppers on November 30th, so about 2 weeks ago. And look at them. That's what they look like. I'm using heat mats, and I have a light source, which I will definitely get into that as well. So yeah, they take forever. So making them nice and warm and happy is pretty critical. Okay. So I get a couple of these heat mats. I put them in the bottom, whatever. I put my tomatoes, peppers, whatever I'm sowing. Zip this up, and this stays nice and toasty. If we get cold weather, like 30s, something like that, nice and toasty. I don't have to worry about my plants dying, going through all the work of covering things with row covers or what have you, or even sowing seeds indoors anymore. So my husband's real happy now. But anyways, this has been working out really great. And obviously these come in a lot of different sizes. On Amazon, you can find little ones, you can find big ones, like whatever, and put it outside, put in a couple heat mats, you're good to go. Now, if you're in a colder climate than me, you might have to put a lot more heat mats in here to keep this warm, or maybe this won't be enough. I don't know. It doesn't get that cold here for me to experiment. Like, yeah, I need 5 heat mats if it drops to like 10 degrees Fahrenheit or something. So you will have to figure that out for yourself and test it out and experiment. But this is fantastic for starting seeds during the winter when you can't sow indoors. Okay. So that's what I've been doing. All right. So, as soon as anything germinates, no matter what you're growing, it needs light. Okay. I would say heat is probably the most important thing when it comes to warm weather crops if you want them to germinate quickly. But if you want them to grow quickly, they need light, and a good source of light. We're not talking a little window here that gets, some sunlight or whatever. That will cause your seedlings to be leggy. I actually have an example of what leggy is. So this is some sun gold tomatoes. I love sun gold. If you have not grown sun gold tomatoes yet, you need to. Okay. This is a hybrid. I don't grow very many hybrids. So when I tell you that I'm actually growing a hybrid, that means it's actually good. I grow predominantly heirlooms because I like to save my own seed and then share that with you guys, like on my website. I do have a couple hybrids that I'm actually like, wow, this actually was amazing. There was a huge difference between this hybrid and my heirloom. So yes, I recommend it. But in general, my heirlooms produce fantastic. Like, I have no reason to even want to grow hybrids. If you, have your gardening skills on point, you take care of that plant the way that it needs, your heirlooms are going to do fantastic. Okay. So I don't believe that hybrids are better than heirlooms for the most part. There are a couple exceptions that I've experimented with, like Alexandria is a zucchini. I have seeds on my website. That thing is the best. And everyone who's got those seeds have told me that is the best zucchini I've ever grown. High disease and pest resistance. It produces insane amounts. If you deal with like squash bugs and that and vine borers, it will still get them, but it tolerates a lot more damage before that plant finally like gives out and is done than like regular heirloom zucchini. So yes, that one I will have to say I've tried it. I can tell you for sure it is amazing. Sun Gold is another amazing one. This is a little cherry tomato. Not only is the flavor like top notch, like everyone will tell you, recommend me a good tasting tomato, they're going to tell you Sun Gold. It is truly that good. But what I really like about this is it does have a pretty high disease and pest resistance and heat tolerance. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, my Sun Gold plants will survive my crazy hot summers here. The plants don't look good and they won't produce for me because it's just too hot. But once the temperatures cool down in like September and that, they pick back up and start growing again. So sometimes I've had a Sun Gold last in my garden like 2 years. Sometimes, if I'm lucky. Okay. If you're up north, more north of me, I'm in Central Florida, you probably will have more success with that happening than I will, or someone in South Florida. So anyways, back to being leggy. I did not have my grow lights set up when I started seeds for this. I'm like, I'll get around to it. And I didn't. I was kind of late with it. But by then this had already sprouted, and they are long and they are leaning towards the direction of the light, right? So if you start seeds indoors, I'm going to say nine times out of 10, you do not have enough light. That window light is not going to be enough for something like a tomato, pepper, or eggplant. They need heat. They need light. They're vigorous. They need that energy to really take off and be ready for transplant at 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever. So if you're struggling and you're like, man, I start things from seed and they're never ready at 8 weeks. Why is Jera's tomatoes so huge at 8 weeks? Because I'm using heat, I've got light, like artificial lights, and I'll show you different kind of light ideas, inexpensive options and more expensive options if you want to. But I've got heat, light, and then I've also got fertilizer. So fertilizing seedlings, super important. As soon as they grow their first set of true leaves, I start fertilizing. So like these sun golds, they're still babies. That's the first set of leaves right there. Those are called cotyledons. And the majority of all vegetable crops, whatever, they always start like that. Like they'll put on these first set of these little leaves that look kind of round. And after that, they'll sprout the next set of leaves. Those are now the true leaves, the adult leaves. They'll usually have the shape of whatever the leaf is for that. Like if it's a zucchini, it now looks like a zucchini leaf. At that point, you can start fertilizing. But with seedlings, you want to be careful because if you give them full strength, regular like fertilizers, they will die. It burns them. That's too much for them to handle. They will die. So what I recommend is something like fish emulsion. If you want, that would be great in this scenario. Or you can get any kind of liquid fertilizer. I recommend liquid for seedlings because you want those nutrients to be available immediately. If you put something granular, it breaks down slowly over time, and those seedlings really need those nutrients now. They can't wait 2 weeks later when it's finally, available, bioavailable. So get a liquid fertilizer. I don't care what kind you get, whatever. Miracle Grow. This is Tiger Bloom. Sorry, I meant to grab my Grow Big. I have Fox Farms brand Grow Big. This stuff is really good. This is the Tiger Bloom. So I give this to my like tomatoes and like peppers when they start flowering to support flowering and fruit production, as an extra feeding of fertilizer, more than what I normally give them. But anyways, Grow Big is really good for seedlings. I don't know if the sound is okay, guys, because I keep hitting the mic. I don't know. But sorry if it sounds kind of weird or scratchy. But this is Fox Farms Grow Big. They have directions here, how to feed. General feeding, like for normal plants, 2 to 3 teaspoons for every gallon. But since you're feeding seedlings, you're going to do half of whatever the directions say on your package of this Miracle Grow, whatever you're using. You're going to do half of whatever the directions say. So instead of 2 to 3 teaspoons, I'm going to do like 1 or 1.5 teaspoons per gallon of water, and you should be fine. And I will fertilize my seedlings like once a week. Like every Friday, I do F is for fertilizer. So Friday is my fertilizer day. So I remember to fertilize my plants. Let me check my chat real quick, guys. I have to scroll all the way up. I really hate this. I wish it would just stay up, but it doesn't. Everything you start on your line, I get sluggy. You need more light. You need some artificial light here. I'm going to show you. I'm going to get up and show you guys my setup here. I had blue creamberries tomato plant last through summer. That is a good one. And I don't know if you were in this class at the beginning. I had mentioned that if you want heat tolerant varieties of stuff, look for the ones that are, dark colors, have anthocyanins that give it dark colors, like anything that's like a black carrot or a black tomato, like Black Beauty, or some of the other black tomatoes, like black seaman, black. There's another one. I have both of them on my website, and I can't remember the other one. But anyways, they're known to be black tomatoes. Japanese trifle is also considered a black tomato. They tend to be more heat tolerant than the regular versions of that plant. So kind of experiment with that. Look for it like tomatillos. They're green and they're purple. The purple one is going to be a little bit more heat tolerant than the regular green one. Just saying. Let me check my chat. I'm sorry, guys. I wish this wasn't this way. So, do you think you need heat mats indoors with my shelving and grow light? I think I pretty much answered that, Nancy, I guess. Yeah, sorry, just seeing your question now, but it lined up with what I just said. Being under grow lights indoors, they don't give heat. Okay, so most grow lights now are lights that you would use for this, or LEDs. Those don't give off heat, which is great. That's not going to, you don't want it to give off heat, but you will still need a heat mat. I think so, if you want to speed up germination of things like tomatoes and peppers. All right. All right. I have some papaya seedlings. What can I fertilize them with? Okay. Can you tell me where you're located? I'm going to assume you're in Florida, but papayas, you can give them whatever. Quite honestly, they grow so vigorously. Papayas and bananas, for example, they just take whatever. If you want to use 10-10-10 on them, that's fine. If you want to use Espoma brand, like I use citrus toad, not just on my citrus trees, but all my fruit trees and like fruiting things. You can go ahead and do that. They're not picky. Whatever you give them, they're going to thrive anyways. However, we are in winter right now. I don't recommend that you fertilize things like papayas and bananas and stuff, or even like mangoes right now, because if you fertilize them, you're going to trigger them to put on new growth, and we're still expecting more cold fronts. And so those cold fronts are going to kill that new growth. Okay, so you just want your plant to stay. Just stay. Don't put energy into putting in new growth, because it's probably going to die off and get damaged anyways, and just wait until spring to start fertilizing those things again. Right now with the mangoes, the issue with the mangoes is they start flowering, like they get triggered to flower if you start fertilizing them and stuff like that. And we don't really want them to flower right now. Mine is actually showing signs that it's about, I have a Kerry dwarf mango. I'm looking at it right now. It's showing signs of like putting on new growth and flower panicles. And that's not good, because when the temperatures get to like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, it causes damage to those flowers, and then you're going to lose your fruit. Okay, that's what happened to me last year. I didn't fertilize them, but we just so happened to get like a later cold front, and it was in like full bloom, and all of them died. All the flowers, I lost all of them. I did not have a good crop of mangoes. So don't fertilize them. You will trigger them to start flowering when it's still cold, and that's not good. Like I haven't even fertilized it at all, and it's still being triggered to a flower because of our fluctuations in temperatures. If it's cold all of a sudden and then it heats up, the mango thinks spring has arrived. I can start flowering. But spring has not arrived. It's just in Florida, our weather is it fluctuates so much. So a lot of fruiting trees kind of get tricked into thinking it's spring, and then all of a sudden it gets cold again. If you notice any of your peaches, nectarines, plums, stuff like that are putting on flowers. I have a couple peach trees too, and they have a couple little flowers on them. They're also being tricked into thinking it's spring, but it's not. So not a good time for that stuff. The peaches and stuff though, they will start flowering again at the right time, no problem. I'm not worried about the flowers getting exposed to cold and dying. They're fine. But the mangoes, yeah, the mangoes definitely, I wish they wouldn't flower right now. Be a little careful on the variety of mangoes and stuff like that you select, because mangoes, there's a variety that flowers and fruits at all times of the year. So just pick the ones that flower, maybe not during the winter. I didn't know that when I bought my Kerry mango tree, but I love the Kerry mango tree. It's fiberless. It tastes like honey. It's a dwarf variety, so it grows really well in the space that I have. So yeah, I will have to cover that tree up if we get temperatures drop, in the low 40s and 30s. So I have to be prepared for that. But anyways, yeah, let me check the questions one last time before I move on with the class. Sorry, you mentioned your outdoor setup, so wasn't sure it was the same. Oh, for indoors, yes, I'm sorry. I used to do the same thing indoors, except I didn't have, the plastic part of this, but I had a shelving unit, like not this exact greenhouse. I had like a different plastic shelving unit for like, organization, whatever. And I would put my trays. See, I sew things in trays. I'll give you guys a little closer view of this stuff. But like I put all my seedlings in trays. I would put the heat mat, and then I would slide this over the tray. It's open. It's not closed. That's totally fine for indoors. The heat keeps that soil warm and stimulates germination. And then the grow light, you need it because, well, indoors, you probably don't have a lot of bright light, or at least bright enough for a tomato or something like that to grow properly. All right, so the dwarf mango, it's called Carrie, Carrie. It's a pretty popular mango cultivar. Like if you go to the nursery, most likely you will find it. Very good. Carrie mango, yes, thank you. Okay, so let me show you guys. I have notes to keep myself on track here. So I'm going to stand up now. So I'm going to adjust this camera because I really want to show you guys a closer view of the setup here and some other supplies and stuff that I haven't mentioned yet. And can you guys tell me, do you hear me okay? Like I said, I have a mic today because it's really windy and I want the sound quality to be better. But then if like my hair or the clothes like hits it, it does sound kind of scratchy. I don't know if that's what's going on. But anyways, I'm trying to be gentle as I move so you guys don't hear it like crazy. Okay, so this is my shelf. I have this plastic here. I have it tucked in right now. It's a little high end, but it's good. Better high end than too low or the wind, because the wind is blowing straight through here. You guys might not notice it, but today's a very windy day, so I decided to use a mic this time. But anyways, thanks for letting me know. Anyways, these are my shelves. I do have plastic here that I have tucked. It's wrapped around these, and I bring it out and close it if we're expecting cold weather to protect my plants. So this is outdoor seed sowing setup. Now, since I sow so many seeds for stuff, I really like shelving units that are like 20 inches wide at least, because I use these trays, and I have links for all this in that email I'm going to send you guys at the end of this class. If you're just joining, I had said I have an email like group. At the end of this class, I will send a summary with all the supplies, whatever things I mentioned, so you can relax and enjoy the class instead of like taking notes or whatever. So I definitely have all of the supplies and stuff on there, so you guys know what I'm talking about. But anyways, I get these 10 by 20. Can you guys see that? 10 by 20 trays. These are like heavy duty trays because I can fill it up with my seeds, and it's very easy for me to pick this up, put it in, take it out. If you're sowing seeds indoors, you most likely will have to take all your seeds out, put them outside to water them so you don't get water all over your house. So this makes that like way, way easier, okay? One second, guys. Someone's actually calling me, but I have to hang it up. All right. So I get these trays from Amazon. Another good place is your local like hydroponics store. A lot of times they sell these very well. They have a lot of options of seed trays like this. And the reason why I'm using 10 by 20 is because that's a standard size for a lot of the seed cells type trays, which I also use when sowing seeds, okay? So like this is a 72 cell seed tray. This is 10 by 20, and it fits in those real perfectly as well. This right here with the solo cups, this is my tomatoes or any crop that is big at transplant time, like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, even things like loofah, moringa. I like to sow them in solo cups. So I go buy a pack of solo cups. I cut out some holes at the bottom. There's 3 little holes. I've used these for years. So yeah, it was kind of annoying initially to have to sit there and cut all these holes out, but I've been using these for years. So one and done. So it's fine. But this will house your bigger size crops, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, loofahs, whatever, the entire duration of their growing period until they're ready to transplant, because I don't want to waste time potting things up. Okay. And when you pot things up, you also have a tendency to damage the root system. So don't pot up. Don't waste your time potting up. Just start off in a container. Trust me, they will fill this whole thing up. This is perfect for them. And then you don't have to worry about it getting root bound and all that kind of stuff. So this will house a tomato for 8 to 12 weeks just fine, and all those other bigger crops. I believe this is a 16-ounce cup, I think. Just your standard like solo cup. And one of these 10 by 20 trays holds 18 of them. So literally today, I filled all of these 3 trays. There's 3 of them here. I haven't put my seeds in them yet, but that's for all my tomatoes. So I took these trays outside. I got my big bag of seed starting mix, and I filled them all up, pre-moistened them. They are ready to start sowing seeds. So it'll take me, I don't know, like less than 10 minutes to sow maybe 50, 60 tomato seeds, because I'm ready. Like I prepped up everything. So that's why I like to use 10 by 20 stuff. These 72 cell seed trays are better for smaller things like lettuces, tatsoys, herbs, flowers, stuff like that, that you grow for maybe like 4 weeks or so, and they're ready to transplant. So this is better for those kinds of things. And it's 72 little plants here. That's a lot. So that's why I have a couple of those. And I get these two from Amazon or your local hydroponics store. It's pretty standard size stuff. Let me check my questions really quick. Do you use seed starting soil? Yes, that's the next thing here I need to discuss. So when you're starting seeds, when I started my journey early on as a gardener, I would use soil, literally compost or soil I would take out of my backyard. And I noticed I did not get very good germination doing that. So then I started experimenting with other types of soil mediums. And finally, I started using seed starting mix and got a world of a difference. Okay, like almost 100% success with that. Now, the thing is, I'm in Florida. We have lots of humidity, lots of rain. There's high incidence of pathogens that cause things like dampening off. Pathogens, what I mean by that is molds, funguses, bacteria, viruses, all those things are pathogens, and they exist in high amounts here in Florida because it's so wet. These things proliferate in wet conditions, right? Especially like powdery mildew and stuff like that. Same thing with dampening off, which is like the number one thing that is going to kill off your seeds. So when you take soil from compost, which is full of pathogens and all kinds of microbes and whatever, or you take soil from your backyard that is also full of all these pathogens, microbes, whatever, and you start seeds in them, there's a high risk chance you're going to get dampening off or something and your seed dies. So if you've been struggling with that, you need to start thinking about a seed starting for mix formulated specifically for sowing seeds, or make your own. So you can go to the store and buy a little bag seed starting mix. They're expensive though, in my opinion. They I don't know, like a little bag is like $7, and I'm sowing hundreds of things. So I started making my own with equal parts of peat moss. You can get a big bale of peat moss from like Home Depot. I think $12 for a huge block of it. And then mix in some perlite or vermiculite. That's those little white pieces that you find in the soils, like this right here. That keeps it light and airy and helps with drainage and stuff like that. And if you find it, you can add a couple handfuls of worm castings. That's a very mild and gentle like fertilizer that helps your seedlings get off to a good start. And that's it. So you get a wheelbarrow, whatever, mix all this stuff in there, and you have a big batch of seed starting mix for a lot less than buying it already, mixed for you. But obviously, if you're just sowing a couple seeds, then buy the little package. But if you're sowing a lot more, it's probably going to be a lot better quality and a lot more economical if you make it yourself. Now, since I'm a business, I can go buy these things like in bulk or whatever. So I buy ProMix brand, a big, huge bale of ProMix brand seed starting mix. I have seen in Home Depot some bags of like ProMix brand stuff. I don't know if that's seed starting mix specifically though, but I do like ProMix brand a lot. So if you see that, that'll probably be a good option for you as well. But it's super easy and cheap to make your own. Okay. So for many years I was doing that, but then once I started doing, my nursery and seed business and all of that, and now I'm a business that I can buy in bulk from places, it costs me about the same to buy it already packaged for me anyway. So that's what I use, ProMix seed starting mix. So with doing that, you have now created or are using what we call a soilless soil because it actually doesn't have like dirt in it. It's like peat moss, vermiculite, perlite, that kind of thing, which means it's pretty void of pathogens to begin with. So when your seeds start growing in this, you have a lot less incidence of dampening off, all those things, whatever. All right. Especially if you're in Florida, like I said, it's really humid here, a lot of moisture. So I've definitely noticed a huge decrease in that particular issue. So I highly recommend you start off with some type of soilless mixture. Again, I know like maybe you just can't afford it. You just have compost or soil from your backyard. Then do what you have to do. It's better to use that than nothing. Okay. Like don't not garden because you couldn't, get the certain supplies or whatever. Use whatever you have, obviously. Things will grow from that. It's just the risk or the incidence of like seed failure or seedling failure is much higher. So, sow a lot more maybe than what you need to account for that. So that was soil. I already showed you guys fertilizers. I showed you some of the containers. The only other kind of container I use besides the solo cups here and that 72 cell seed tray right here, put that back on the table here, is 4-inch size pots like this right here. This is a 4-inch size pot, and so those are pretty much the 3 sizes I use. This is really good for things like sunflowers. Sunflowers are big plants and they have a large taproot. So if I plant them in the 72 cell seed tray, they very quickly get root bound and they do get stunted in growth. So I like to either direct sow them from seed, if you can, is preferred, or at least put them in something bigger like this 4-inch size pot. I don't do them in these because you should not be growing a sunflower plant that long in a container, because it will take, I don't know, 3 months or so to fill this whole thing up. They should be flowering at 3 months. So they should have been planted in your garden a long time ago. A 4-inch size cup is great. Or maybe, you know, you're growing lots of herbs, you want them to be bigger in size before you transplant them out. This is tarragon, actually. So this is a great option as well. So that's it. Those are the 3 sizes that I use for all my seedlings. Tarragon, let me look at this. And then how do you know it's ready to be transplanted? You know, track your dates. Have you hit the 4 weeks? Have you hit the 8, 12, whatever? You're probably good around there. But if you want to know for sure, for like anything, no matter what you're growing, just gently pop it out of its little container and check its root system. So let's check this tarragon right here. Trying to be gentle here. So when I took it out, it did not fall apart. That's a good sign. That means the root system is well developed. It's keeping the soil together. And it's not exactly all the way root bound. It's starting to get there though, because you could see all those roots there forming, like going around, wrapping around at the bottom. That's a clear sign that this is ready to be transplanted. So if I take a seedling or whatever and I flip it over to the bottom and I see roots on the bottom, most likely it's ready to be transplanted. So then just take it out, see if that soil sticks together. If it, you know, it's ready to go. This needs to be transplanted as soon as possible. All right, so lights. Let's talk about lights. Let me check my message or my questions real quick before I keep moving. You've had great success with coconut coir and worm castings and perlite. Coconut coir is great. It's basically something else that you could use if you don't want to use peat moss. You could definitely just use coco coir. The mildew, yep, same here. It's on another level if you're in Florida. I've had great, oh, I read that one right. Can I direct sow seeds for zinnias? You're in 10A like me. No, it's still a little too cold. And we're going into colder weather from this point forward. So no, I would hold off on direct sowing seeds for zinnias until our last spring frost, which is around that 2nd week of February. So after that, you can start throwing seeds everywhere for anything, really, unless we get an unusually, you know, cold winter and another cold front comes through. But even by then, like, your zinnias probably haven't germinated yet. So that's my target for direct sowing seeds for stuff. Or you can start them in containers. Like I usually start zinnias, stuff like that, in these 72 cell seed trays. So you can have 72 plants of zinnias here waiting for you. I would start them 4 weeks before your last spring frost date at minimum. So that would land you sometime in January. So if you're like me, if your last spring frost is like that 2nd week of February, then middle of January, you can start sowing seeds for zinnias and these, and then you should be good to go. And lots of other flowers and herbs too. All right, I think I'm caught up with the questions. So let's move on. The next thing I want to talk about is lighting, like what kind of lights I'm using. So, you know, I try to use the most inexpensive stuff possible. So I was watching The Rusted Gardener on YouTube. I've been following him for years. He gave me this idea, and this really changed my seed sowing going forward forever in my life. So he talks about using shop lights instead of actual grow lights. So this is some shop lights. These white ones here, I don't know if you guys can see those. They're cheap ones that I got from Amazon. This is a cheap one I got from Walmart years ago, but I have not been able to find this at Walmart anymore. So I don't know what that's about, but if you go to like Harbor Freight or Amazon, usually you can get these other cheap like white shop lights, way cheaper than actual official grow lights. So these shop lights, I want to say this was like $20 for one. And if you're, a normal home backyard gardener, you probably only need a couple of these if you're sowing seeds indoors. I am outdoors, but this is pretty shady, so I still use lights because if they're not getting direct sunlight, then they're going to need light, especially these tomatoes, peppers, that kind of thing. So this was some of the first grow lights shop lights I got years ago, and they work great. They still work today. They are LEDs, so they don't produce heat, and they don't cost a lot in terms of, how much electricity it uses. The main thing you want to look for, though, is that it's a daylight range light, and that it has like 5,000, I think it's kelvins, which is that daylight range, or higher. So when you're shopping for that light bulb, it will say, how many kelvins, whatever. Make sure it's 5,000 or above. That will, at minimum, be pretty decently bright and be good for your seedlings. So I attach these to my, shelving unit, whatever that might be, with some zip ties. It lays like this. And then you just want to maintain your seedlings at about 4 inches from the bottom of your light. So as they grow and get taller, you will have to adjust this up to, account for that. But just keep it, a good 4 inches or so, 3 inches from your seedlings at all times. If you notice that the leaves on your seedlings look white, like white sections, they're getting way too much light, it's just too intense. So you might have to make some adjustments there, but that's usually what white leaves signals, that it's just getting way too much light. So these work great. However, through the years, me testing out different things, I got curious. What would my results be like if I used an actual official grow light? So I have 2 of these Mars Hydro Square grow lights. They are kind of pricey. They're like, they're on sale on Amazon right now. They're usually like $119, but there's like $24 off right now or something. So I'm going to buy at least one more right now. But I've been buying them slowly throughout this year. I got the first one. I was like, let me try it out. If I don't like it, I'll just return it on Amazon and keep using my shop lights. But the light on this is insanely bright, like way more bright than those shop lights. So at least I'm going to use these on my peppers, tomatoes, those types of really like heat-loving, warm weather crops, since it's so bright. And then these, regular shop lights or whatever, I'll use it for like my flowers, herbs, any kind of leafy greens that don't need like that intensity of light. So that's what I'm doing right now, until one day maybe I'll just accumulate enough of those Mars Hydros. They're really great. Like just the difference in the intensity of the light, I definitely noticed that there. But you don't have to buy those at all. Okay, you can definitely still get away with those shop lights, like I was saying. And those shop lights are like $20 each, something like that. So, but if you want to take it to the next level, you're, definitely an official grow light is going to help you with that. Let me check my messages here. I bought hollyhock seeds and they're doing well in the pot, but I'm not sure when to plant them out. Okay, so actually, right now is a great time to start sowing seeds for hollyhock if you are in a hot summer climate, hot weather climate, because they don't like that intense heat. They're kind of similar. I call them cottage garden flowers, like those gentle European type of flowers or whatever. So that's hollyhocks for you. They are perennial in Florida, or at least to where I'm at. I don't know if you're more south than me where it's even more hot. They might not like that. But I like to grow mine in the 4-inch pots, because hollyhocks, they're huge. By the way, I don't know if you've seen the few, video clips and stuff of hollyhocks that I have some on my YouTube channel. They've got like as tall as my house. They're really, really big, and they throw seeds everywhere. So they reseed, not aggressively, but you are going to get some babies popping up around. No big deal. They're pretty easy to identify. You could just scoop them out, or, give them to your garden friends. I would love it if someone gave me some of their hollyhocks. But anyways, just letting you know, it's a beast. Okay, they get really, really big. I like to start them in 4-inch or bigger because they have a big taproot system as well, kind of like what I was saying about the sunflowers. It's a huge plant. It's going to have a very big root system. So don't let them get root bound. If you have to pot them up, do that. I would wait. I don't know. I'm gonna wait until about January or like the middle of January or later to actually put them out in the garden because they're seedlings. If you're growing them right now, they're probably just seedlings. And that cold, those last couple of cold fronts will probably kill your seedlings or affect them in some way. So just grow them out now. If you haven't started seeds for hollyhocks, you still have time to do that right now. And just wait, until the temperatures get a little less cold before you plant those out into the garden. But after that, your hollyhocks should take off. They really enjoy the spring and fall time here. They're probably not going to flower for you, though, until fall. Some people say it takes like a whole next year. I don't find that with my hollyhocks. I find definitely 6 to 9 months, somewhere around there, they will start flowering for you. Maybe they just are kind of vigorous here in Florida. I don't know. So yeah, if you plant them now in very early, January or the middle or end of January, they'll start growing for you, getting pretty big in size, then start flowering sometime in fall, probably. The root system, the upper growth will probably die back and you'll think it's dead, but it's not. The root system is still alive underground, and then it will send up a new growth the next season or whatever, just to give you an idea of the life cycle of hollyhocks, at least here in Florida or warm weather climates. So try to keep them in a bigger size pot so you don't have issues with them getting root bound or something like that. Okay. All right. So let me make sure that I discussed all of the items here, supplies that we use, or that I use when sowing seeds. And just so you guys know, I do have a YouTube video guide tutorial all about all of this, sowing seeds, all whatever. Definitely will go more into detail there than this class. So if you want to recap that or see it again or something, or even the shots in that video are more close up than, this class. I really can't move around easily with a live class. So go check out that video. I'll also put it in the email summary at the end of this class. Okay, so let's talk about sowing seeds for certain crops. So the first thing I want to talk about are tomatoes. I have to get to it. I did start seeds for some of my like dwarf and micro dwarf cultivars. I'm going really hard into that this season because I enjoyed growing them so much. This season right now, my fall or whatever. So next season, which is spring, but I start planting those in January. The tag fell. I do plan on growing a lot more dwarfs, micro dwarfs, and determinates because they just produce so much earlier than the indeterminates. So anyways, this is a dwarf. So the dwarf plants, I don't know if you haven't heard, there's the Dwarf Tomato Project. It's a project where lots of tomato breeders from all over the world got together, and they've been developing new breeds of dwarf varieties of tomatoes. I can't believe I waited until last year to finally start growing a dwarf tomato because for some reason I thought they just produce small fruit, and that is totally not true. The plant size is small. A typical dwarf will hit like 3 feet tall, something like that. But the fruit, the tomatoes are still beefsteaks. If it's a beefsteak variety, big. Like actually one of the biggest tomatoes I've ever grown came from Susie's Beauty, which is a dwarf cultivar. And I was shocked. And I have seeds for that on my website if you want to try growing it. So ever since that, I've been experimenting with a lot of them. Since they are more compact plants, it's okay to start them in like a 4-inch size container. And not, the full, solo cup type thing. This is much better though for indeterminates that go crazy and just grow. Like at the end of my tomato season, the indeterminates, some of them are like 25 feet vines. Like it's ridiculous because in Florida we have such a long growing period. We have 9 months in a row to grow tomatoes. Some of mine are like mini trees by the end of the season. So those kind of varieties much better grown in like a solo cup or something like that than, 4-inch. But, your micro dwarfs are considered like they hit like 12 inches max. So they're really great for, patio gardens. If you have an apartment and you just don't have space, they'll grow in a little 1-gallon size pot or even maybe smaller than that, and fruit for you. However, all of those are little cherries. I've never found a micro dwarf that put on full-sized tomatoes. Probably impossible for such a tiny plant. I don't know. But anyways, I've been experimenting with those a lot because I finally got some green stock vertical garden planters. I have 2 of them. And so micro dwarf tomatoes would fit perfectly into those. I have 3 different ones I'm growing right now in one of my garden stocks. These dwarf tomatoes, I've only grown these in the ground, but I am experimenting with growing them in the green stock, the deeper one, just to see how that goes. Because if I can cram like 35 dwarf tomatoes on one vertical garden planter, that would be insane. Like that, it would be such a huge space saver for me anyways. So so tomatoes. Let me get some tomato seeds here and just show you guys really quick. In general, no matter what you're sowing from seed, you want to look at the seed size, the size of the seed, to determine how deep you need to plant it. The smaller the seed, the less deep it goes. Most people kind of say a guideline is plant it double deep as its size, if that makes any sense. So if you have a really big loofah seed, that's 1 inch, you're going to plant it like 2 inches deep. If you have a really, really small little, I don't know, some of the smaller stuff like chamomile, for example, is microscopic basically, then those things tend to not do well if you cover them with soil. Like that is just too much. Sprinkle them over the top and just gently, let me get a cup here. So for the teeny tiny stuff like chamomile or ground cherries, I will sprinkle some seeds on the surface and just pat them down so they make contact with the soil. They don't get blown off by the wind or something like that. And there is a tendency for the stuff with smaller seeds to also require light to germinate. Chamomile is one of those things, ground cherries. So if you cover it with soil, it's not going to germinate that great. So if it's something like that, really, after you sprinkle the seeds on the surface here, put it under intense light. It needs intense light to germinate. So a lot of people report to me they struggle germinating the ground cherries and that kind of thing. They need light to germinate. You can't just put them there and they'll come out. So that is probably the number one issue there. But anyways, let me get some tomato seeds right here. So I have a solo cup. I will sow 2 seeds, 2. Just to make sure that at least one of them will germinate. But with tomatoes, man, they grow. They germinate so quickly. The majority of the time, both of those seedlings will germinate for me. So I take, it's probably going to be a little hard to show you guys like this, but I put 1 seed on one end right there. I don't know if you can't even see that. But anyways, I'll put 1 seed here and 1 on the exact opposite, and that's it. And I will put a tiny little amount of soil on there. They don't need too much soil. And most likely, both of those will germinate, which is fine. Some people, if you want to, you can pull out the weaker seedling and just keep 1 in that cup. But I'll be honest with you, I struggle with just terminating the life of seedlings and thinning stuff out. So for my tomatoes, I'm trying to get one here that has both of them. Well, anyways, here's a dwarf that I guess I over sprinkled a lot of seeds in there, but normally it would be 2 and I leave 2. 2 is good for tomatoes. And I will plant the whole thing in the whole 2. I won't thin it out to 1 and just plant 1. I will put both in there. That is me. A lot of people have problems with that. They say they compete for nutrients, They will if you don't fertilize. I fertilize really well, so that's not a concern for me. And my tomatoes, if I have two plants coming out, I leave them. But I also heavily prune my tomatoes, and I have videos on my channel about that too, where I show like my tomato hook and spool system, how I select like 1, maybe 2 leader vines. You're supposed to select 1 leader vine, but again, I have issues just cutting things. So many times mine will spin off to like 2, maybe even 3. But I still get tons of production. So yeah, I will plant, the 2 in there. This one has too many. Yeah, this is too much. This has 5 seedlings. That's too much. I'm going to thin it out to 2. But yeah, so sometimes people are like, don't do that, that's bad. It's fine. Most of the time it's fine. Just grow your stuff, okay? Let me check the comments real quick. Oh, yes, good question. Do I leave my lights on all of the time? No. So I turn them on when I wake up in the morning, and I turn them off when I go to sleep at night. Plants need that rest at night like we do. Okay, so do not leave your grow lights on at all time. You'll probably start noticing those leaves get that white spotting and burning that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so just turn them on when you wake up, turn them off when you go to sleep. So yeah, that's sowing seeds for tomatoes. These were sowed December 1st, which is actually when I prefer to do it, and I have not finished. So I really need to get onto it right after this class. I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna finish today. But yeah, so these were sowed December 1st, so 2 weeks and a little bit more. They look great. They literally germinated in less than 3 days. Sometimes next day, if you have a heat mat. All right, and the conditions are ideal, you'll get lucky, and sometimes it'll happen next day. But most of mine, it's like 3 days, okay? So don't worry about, some people will overseed because you're worried that they will not germinate. If you get good seed from a good company, good supplier, those seeds are going to germinate, okay? Don't worry about, the seed being old and maybe one or a couple germinating out of the whole bunch. I find that happens, and not to bash like other companies or whatever, but when I buy seeds from like the big box stores, their packets, I find those don't germinate really well. I mean, they will, but they don't germinate as thoroughly as like seed packets I get from other companies. And I think it's because who knows how long those seeds have been sitting in that store, and who knows if the employees or however they've been maintaining it has been maintained properly. But I find like, especially stuff for like onions, buying a pack of seeds of onions from like Home Depot, they did not germinate very well. So that's my theory on that anyways. So if you're buying a bunch of seeds from like big box stores, maybe there's actual concern there. But if you're getting from, local sellers, little people like me, I mean, these seeds are fresh. They're all going to germinate. Let me check my questions because I saw chats in here or things pop up. Oh, that's interesting. There was a study done that dual leading tomato plants was the best bang for the buck. That's interesting. Sorry if I missed. How many weeks before planting do you recommend for tomatoes? Yeah, so at the very beginning of the class, I said on my website I have a list of all the different kinds of crops and how long it takes for them to be transplant sized from seed. So tomatoes is about 8 weeks if you grow them and use all like these techniques and stuff that I'm talking about. They will grow very quickly, and in 8 weeks they're ready to go. Things like peppers and eggplants, those take forever. So those I say take 12 weeks. So that's 3 months. I actually started sowing seeds for some of my peppers and stuff last month in November. December is like my last chance. Like I'm getting those done now in December. But and then other things, sometimes usually 4 weeks, stuff like that. It just depends. Like little lettuce greens and stuff like that, like 4 weeks. So that list is on my website. I don't know how easy it is to find for you guys because I have lots of they're like blog posts that I put on there with information. So make sure you join my email group because that link or that list will be sent to you at the end of this class. And if you haven't joined that yet, if you go to my website, jarasgarden.com, there's a button at the top that says email newsletter or something like that. You click that, you submit your email, and then that way you get the list that has everything I'm mentioning in this class. So you can, find that. Also, buying more local seeds are better. Yes, absolutely true. I just got a couple of heat mats now, looking to understand lighting. We'll check your channel. I don't know if you just joined, Tia, because I just went through the whole lighting thing. But I do have a tutorial on like this, all this stuff I'm showing you guys. I made a full like tutorial seed sowing guide. And it's the same stuff. I haven't changed my method since last year, and I think I put that video on spring of last year. So that is still my method. And it tells you where you can find everything, all the supplies, soil, lighting, all of that kind of stuff. I will also be sending that in that email to a link at the bottom to that tutorial if you guys need, you know, more in-depth details or miss something. Okay, so that's tomatoes. I showed you guys how to sow the seeds for the tomatoes. In about 12 weeks, 8 weeks, they should be nice, big, ready to be transplanted. So backtrack 8 weeks from your last spring frost date to know when you start your seeds for tomatoes, okay? Then we have, what's the next crop I have here? So these are, I'm going through the crops that I'm starting from seed now in December because my last spring frost date is the second week of February. So some of you might be a little bit different, but this is like what I'm doing right now. Like these are like my goals for December is the tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. And peppers and eggplants sowed and started the same exact way in the solo cups. Everything, here's some peppers, too many germinated, I'm going to leave it at 2, and I'm good with that. So same thing there, peppers and eggplants. All right, if you want to grow sweet potatoes this spring, I don't know if you've ever tried growing your own slips. I mean, you can go buy them. You definitely can go buy sweet potato slips online or whatever. But they're very easy to grow your own. They just take a long time. The whole process is going to take you like 2 to 3 months. So you get a sweet potato. You can go buy some from the grocery store. Just make sure they're organic so they haven't been sprayed with growth inhibitors. You can root it in water. You can root it in soil. I'm actually trying to make a YouTube video about that because there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Lots of different ways you can root sweet potatoes. So that potato, after a couple weeks, will start sending out these sprouts, tons of little sprouts. One potato might yield you 5 to maybe 10 sprouts. It just depends. Then you cut off those sprouts from the root. And then root those in like water. So I have some here. These are really big, but I rooted these in water. These came off from my existing plants. So I have sweet potato plants actually all behind me right here. And I was worried that the cold is going to like kill my plants off. And plus I need to propagate some new ones to plant this spring. So I literally cut off stems and I just put them in water. And they root super fast, guys. They root like in like 2 weeks, like super easy from the stem piece though. So that's what I'm saying. If you're rooting it from, a potato that you got from the grocery store or whatever, you got to wait for that to sprout, which is going to take, I don't know how many weeks. Then you cut off all of the sprouts, which would then be like little pieces like this. And then you stick those in water. So I just got like an old, little mason jar or whatever. You put those in water, and then like in 2 to 3 weeks, they have their own root system, and this is a sweet potato slip. By the way, this sweet potato variety is called Tainong, if I'm saying that right, Taign, Tainung, something like that. I don't know. I don't know, some weird name. Not a lot of people grow this. I got my first slips from Cody Cove Farms. He's another backyard person like me, nursery in Florida, but he has some really cool, like rare, hard to find things. He had slips. I don't know if he has these in stock right now. I don't know. But I got this from his website, and they were absolutely the best sweet potatoes I've ever grown. They're huge. They don't need like fertilizer. They don't need water. Like they just grow. They're massive size potatoes. They're great. Best variety I've ever grown. So I for sure took cuttings because I was worried if it gets really cold and my whole plant dies, I'll be really sad. But anyways, very vigorous, wonderful, wonderful sweet potato variety for Florida. I might put some of these on my website, but I really would appreciate it more if you guys went and supported him. Cody Cove Farms in Florida, please. He found this or developed it. I don't know. However he found this. And I'm really grateful that he finds a lot of unique varieties and stuff that do really well in subtropical, tropical climates like Florida. Stuff I've never seen anywhere else. So go support him first. If he doesn't have stock of this, I will probably be putting slips on my website. And he doesn't ship out of Florida as well. As of right now, the time of filming this class, he doesn't ship outside of Florida. So if you're outside of Florida and you want to try growing some, then yeah, sure. You can find some on my website soon. I need to root a lot more, but please, go support him first, okay? All right, so sweet potatoes, if you want to grow some of your own slips, right now you have to get started with that whole process and sprouting and rooting your slips, okay? The next crop, let me check my chat real quick. I hate this. I hate having to scroll through this. Oh, you just started your slips yesterday. Good job. Okay. I'm reading the comment about Jock in the garden. I love his stuff too. Okay. Yeah. So there's so many methods to growing sweet potato slips. Some people will root them the whole potato in water, and they have great success with that. I actually don't have really good success with that. They just tend to rot out. I don't know what it is. So I have also tried like Jock in the garden, his method or similar methods of rooting it in just soil, and that works out a lot better for me. I don't know why. So if it's good to have multiple ways of doing something or ideas. So if one doesn't work for you, you just try the other one. But yeah, some people report rooting in water works better for them, or rooting in soil works better for them. So just try it out, see what works best for you. Okay, so other tropical stuff that I'm starting right now is moringa and loofah, because they take forever to like start germinating, for one, because they have hard seed shells, and then just getting to a transplant size. So if you want to plant those in your garden, like as soon as your last spring frost date has passed, now's the time to start them from seed. And or you might have a really short growing season, like if you're up north, because loofah takes like 6 months from seed all the way to harvesting like dried out loofah. Some people don't have 6 months in a row of warm temperatures to grow that. So starting them indoors, in cups and containers. I use solo cups for loofah and moringa because they get really big. Is how you can get a jump start on your season and grow these things. The thing with both of those, they have hard seed shells. So I wish I had a box. I create like a little mini box, but if you have a greenhouse like this with the plastic, that's fine too. You want to soak those seeds overnight to soften them up. You can even nick the loofah seeds a little bit to get water to flow into the seed. Soak them in warm water for 24 hours. Then you're going to sow your seeds in, your solo cup. Then you're going to put all of your solo cups either in a greenhouse like this or a box, so that you can put like aluminum foil or plastic wrap or something over it to seal it. You want to lock that moisture and humidity in there. That's what's going to get your loofah and moringa to sprout. Hey guys, I don't know what happened. That's never happened to me before. It just turned off and said the stream was interrupted. And I just hit resume. Do you guys see me? Do you hear me? Are we okay? I don't know what happened there. Okay now. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry. That's never happened. I don't know what caused that, but interesting to know that you could just resume it back. But yeah, so I make a box and trap all that heat and humidity with loofah and moringa to get them to grow. And I do have YouTube video tutorials on both of those if you want to see like my whole little box setup. But if you have a greenhouse, same thing. It traps the heat and humidity in there for you. All right, so then there are some things that you can direct sow right now. It's December, and I have a monthly growing guide on my channel for almost every month of the year. I did post someone for December, and I go through all of the things that you can start from seed or plant, right now. And so just a reminder, it is December, but if you are in like these southern parts of the United States where it doesn't snow or your ground doesn't freeze, you can direct sow seeds right now for lots of things like radish, beets, turnips. You can still direct sow seeds for those cold weather type stuff until about like February, and then the heat starts coming back, and I don't recommend going beyond that point. You can still direct sow seeds for lettuce, tatsoi, spinach, Swiss chard, all of those little like greens and stuff, and peas. Right now is the last chance, I say, for you to start direct sowing seeds for peas. Peas, as soon as they get a little heat, they start getting crispy and brown, and they're done. Like, that's it. We have a very small window to grow them. So Ideally, I like to direct sow seeds for peas, snow peas, snap peas, fresh like shelling peas in November, like the middle of November. But you can still squeeze with, sowing some right now in the middle of December. Don't wait till the end of December, like right now. And you can still probably squeeze in another crop. So definitely take advantage, because freshly grown peas, like snow peas and stuff, when you harvest those, they start losing their sugar content real fast. So I say that because if you go to the grocery store and buy a little package of snow peas and stuff, they've lost a lot of their sugar content. They taste good, but they've lost a lot of the flavor. So I've definitely noticed with peas, like when I grow my own, it's amazing. Like they don't even make it into the kitchen. They're like my garden snacks. I'm like eating them as I garden because they're so sweet. They're so much more sweeter than the stuff you buy at the grocery store. Let me check my chat real quick. And I'm supposed to have ended this at 5. I try to make this 1 hour, but I always go over, guys. High winds, that could be it. That could be the high winds in the internet. Should turnips only be direct sown? Yes. Root crops, and I know turnips form, well, they're kind of underground a little bit too, but they are considered like, you treat them like root crops. So like carrots as well, they have to be direct sown because they're going to put a taproot down, and that's what you're eating. You're eating the carrots taproot. So if you sow them in, a cup or container or tray, whatever, and then it comes to the time to transplant in your garden, most likely you're going to disturb that root system. You're going to shake it up. You're going to move it around a little bit in that soil and then transplant it. And that will mess up the shape of that taproot, which will form into the carrot or turnip, whatever you're going to eat. So that is why those crops, people say direct sow those seeds only. There are some crops that a lot of people say direct seed only, and I find that's just not true. Those, yes, turnips, carrots, yes, that is true. You have to direct sow them. An example of the ones that you don't have to direct sow are beans and corn. So a lot of people say you can only direct sow seeds for those. That is not true. All right. I have critters or stuff, whatever, that like to chomp and eat the little seedling as soon as it sprouts. Or like with sunflowers, they'll like dig them out of the ground. I don't know how they know I put them there. Dig them out of the ground. They'll eat them up. So I started experimenting with sowing corn, beans, and sunflowers in like trays or whatever. Sunflowers, like I said earlier in the class, I like to use something bigger, but like sowing them indoors. So for for beans and corn, I like to use the 72 cell seed trays. I will put 1 seed per little thing. At the 3-week mark, no later, you need to transplant them out. Because the issue with those, and why people say they have to be direct sown, is because you're going to be disturbing the root system. But I find when I put them in these 72 cell seed trays, their root system develops like this perfect little block, and I can easily push the whole thing out. I don't disturb any of the root system if you're careful about it. And I just pop them in the ground and they keep growing like nothing happened. So that is a great way to get an early start on your beans and corn season, or if you deal with critters that keep eating the seedlings or whatever. So this works fantastic. I will be waiting until January 1st to sow seeds for corn and beans like that, if that's what you want to do, because they take 3 weeks. And that'll land me at the end of January, which is my target date for starting, for putting those crops outdoors. And I say 3 weeks because if they get root bound, now you got a problem too. You don't want them to get root bound, or especially corn. Corn is a really tall crop. It needs to grow rapidly. If you constrict its growth in some way, it's going to be affected. So 3-week mark. So make sure you have your garden ready ahead of time, so you're not waiting and like, I'll get around to it, and then they get root bound and you've gone beyond the 3 weeks, right? So that's why I say number 1, get your garden space ready, cleaned out, built, whatever you got to do. All right, so that's that. That's pretty much it. What I do for December. So I'm kind of pacing different crops out, and then all of a sudden, when spring arrives, I'm ready to go. Everything is transplant size at that point. So those are the main goals and things for December. In January, just to give you guys an idea, I mentioned earlier that whenever you have the opportunity to direct sow seeds for something, that's better. I really, really like direct sowing seeds for cucumbers, melons, watermelon, that kind of thing. But we're still going to get some cold fronts. So just know if you're going to go that route, you need to protect them in some way when those cold fronts come through. And if you're successful doing that, you will get like a 3-week head start on your cucumbers and stuff like that. I plan to plant those out towards the end of January. And then flowers, January is a good time to start a whole bunch of flowers. Smaller greens, like some more succession sowings of your smaller greens, tatsoi, bok choy, spinach, that kind of thing. And herbs. I like to start herbs pretty much in the 72 cell seed trays as well. If you want to start seeds for zucchinis, tromboncino rapicante, Seminole pumpkin, all that kind of stuff, like early indoors, January is a good time to do it. They take around like 8 weeks or so. Those are kind of bigger crops, so I like to use the 4-inch size containers, and I put 2 seeds to make sure at least one of those germinates in these 4-inch size pots like this. In February, we've reached our last spring frost date, or maybe you're located in a different area. Maybe your last spring frost date is after me, but let's just say you finally reached your last spring frost date, whenever that is. Now what's left to start from seed is all this stuff you want to direct sow from seed. So I was showing you guys earlier how I make a bag for each month. My last bag, when my last spring frost date is left, February, is purely pretty much just things to direct sow from seed. So more greens, herbs, flowers, beans, corn, if you want to direct sow them, cucumber, like everything. Southern peas, if you're in warmer climates anyways, we could start growing like the cow peas and stuff like that. You just got to make sure you wait until your last spring frost date for those. There was something I was going to say about the peas. I forget. I forget. But yeah. So I showed you guys how to sow the seeds. What else here? I think I've pretty much. All right. Last thing, taking care of your seedlings. Let me check the chat real quick. Can I grow corn in containers? Potentially. Corn does get really big. I'm just warning you. The average corn stalk they're thin though. They're thin, but they can get like 8 feet tall. There are some smaller cultivars. So if you're growing in a container or something like that, or grow bags, I recommend the smaller cultivars that hit around 6 feet tall, just to make it a little bit more manageable for you. But the issue with growing corn in containers is not because you're growing it in containers. It's because you need a lot of them to cross-pollinate with each other, so that you get nice cobs, full cobs or ears of corn, right? So if you've ever grown corn before and you peeled it and there was little spots missing, the kernels didn't develop there, it's because it didn't get pollinated properly. So to give you an idea, at minimum, because I've experimented with this a lot in my garden, I haven't grown corn in a grow bag or a container, but I have a bed that is 12 foot by 3 foot, and I have another bed that's 8 foot by 3 foot. And I've filled those beds up with corn separately. You need multiple rows to make a big block, like a rectangle block. And I probably fit in that 8 by 3 bed 4 or 5 rows. I plant them really closely, and 4 or 5 rows, and I space them. If it's a shorter cultivar, the 6 foot ones, you can space them a little closer together, at about like 8 inches apart. If they're the taller ones, space them out a little more, 10 to 12 inches, something like that. And they grow fine. They grow fine because, again, I'm assuming if you're a backyard gardener, you're taking care of your soil, you're fertilizing, you're a little bit more hands-on with, taking care of your plants, nurturing them, as opposed to like a big farm or something like that. They will grow fine. They're not going to compete with each other. So if you're growing in a container or grow bag, you need to simulate that density, right? That block, so that they will cross-pollinate. Corn is wind pollinated. There'll be a cob forming, and there'll be like these little strings at the top. The strings are called silks, and the pollen needs to float in the wind and drop on the silks. And each silk is connected to a kernel on that cob. So if there's a blank spot there, that particular silk did not get pollinated. So you need a thick block. I even shake them a little bit as I'm walking by to release pollen and have it flow around and help with pollination. They are wind pollinated, and of course it's windy, but I find that if I kind of assist with that process a little bit, I get a little better harvest, or more full of a harvest. So yes, totally possible. They do have deep root systems though too. They go real deep in the ground. I would say don't plant them in a container that's less than 12 inches deep. But yeah, the important thing is getting that block, putting a bunch of grow bags or containers together to form a nice thick block. Okay. All right. That's all the questions there. So last bit, I definitely like went over with my class, which is usually what happens because I can't stop talking about gardening. But last portion, I just want to talk about general seedling care, so that okay, you sowed your seeds. Now, what do you do to take care of these little seedlings to make sure they get to transplant size? First thing is watering. With all things water, basically, no matter what you're growing, whether it be in like little containers or out in your garden, you want to let the soil dry out a little bit in between watering. If you're not sure when that's happening or if it's happened, stick your finger in the ground, do the finger test. And if it's dry to your second knuckle, so here's my first knuckle, here's my second knuckle, if this portion is dry, it could use some watering. Or if it's evening time, well, let's say for hot climates, you walk out in your garden in the middle of the day and everything's wilted because it's just so hot. That doesn't mean that they need water. It's just really hot. So if you come back out in your garden and it's evening time when the temperatures have cooled, most of the time they bounce back because there is water in the soil. It's just hot. But if you come out in the evening and they're still wilted, they then really they do need water at that point. So that's kind of how you gauge a couple things. But with your seedlings, you definitely want the soil to dry out in between watering. Dry out enough before it starts wilting though, because that's different. Wilting is bad. That's going to cause stress on your seedlings and affect their growth. But you do want it to dry out a little bit in between, and that will also help prevent things like dampening off, which I can't remember if dampening off is a mold or fungus. I think it's a mold. It grows over the surface of wet soil. So if you allow the soil to dry out in between, that'll kind of prevent that from happening as well. But ideally though, if you grow like houseplants and stuff like that, all the houseplant gurus will say water from the bottom of the container. Same thing with seedlings. You don't really want to be watering the top. You don't want to wet the leaves of your seedlings. You don't want to wet the surface of the soil. So again, that is why I really like these 10 by 20 trays or some kind of tray box, whatever you want to use. Just to hold this. And this tray, you can buy these trays with holes at the bottom or without. I buy mine without because then I take my water hose and I fill up soil into this tray about, I don't know, like 2 inches, something like that. And then I bottom feed my seedlings. So that is ideal. That's the ideal way to water your seedlings to prevent a lot of different kind of issues. And a lot of times too, when I still do it every now and then. I'm not perfect, but when I, water from the top, and some people ask me, how do I water my stuff? I'm outdoors. This is my patio, my porch. I have a concrete floor, so if it gets wet, it doesn't matter. So I have this soft sprayer. This is a soft little rain shower, very soft for your seedlings so you don't damage it, so it doesn't move the seeds around, wash them out. Get a soft sprayer like this, and I just go in here and I spray it. Super easy, super quick. Or, load up the water in the tray, like I was saying. So sometimes this happens quite often. If I water from the top, right? I'm watering from the top. The top looks like it's wet, but my seedling is wilting. I'm like, what's going on here? Well, when you water from the top, sometimes only like that top inch or so might actually get water. You can't see what's going on at the bottom here. And all of this is dry where the roots are. So it's wilting anyways because it's not getting water. So if you water from the bottom up through capillary action, whatever that's called, the water will go up and be absorbed upward. And then the entire thing is getting watered. not just the little top there. So that is something that I have noticed before a lot when watering from above. So that's it. That's basically it with watering your seeds. The other thing you got to watch out for, some people get like gnats, whiteflies. Usually it's gnats though, in their seedlings or even houseplants, potted things, whatever. A nice little trick is to get sand, perlite, vermiculite, something dry like that, and just put a layer of that over. And that kind of prevents, the gnats from laying their eggs in the soil, and that's what perpetuates their life cycle type thing. So if you struggle with that, that's how you can take care of it. What's the other one? All right, if your seedlings get some kind of a mold, fungus, bacteria, blight, powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is probably the most common thing I will see. That means the leaves are not drying out in time for like this bacteria to not grow on it or whatever, mold, whatever, fungus. So my favorite treatment for all leaf diseases, all of them, is 1 cup of hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water. And I probably say this in almost every video I make. I go to Sam's Club, I buy a pack of 2 bottles of hydrogen peroxide for like $2, so they're like $1 each. And this is the 3%. That's a common question people ask me. This is the 3%. So 1 cup per gallon of water, that will clean and disinfect. If we get a lot of rain, and I'm concerned about my tomato plants, like now, actually, we just got a whole bunch of rain, right? I'm concerned my tomato plants are going to get all sorts of things. I'm going to start treating with this maybe once every 3 to 5 days until you see an improvement and you see that like the new growth or whatever is looking healthy and not infected. So this is what I use. Some people use like a milk water mixture for powdery mildew. I've never done that. For me personally, I'm sure it works. I'm not saying it doesn't work. Or they make water solution with water and baking soda, something like that. I'm sure they work, but I've always used this, and this has always just worked for me, so why change? So this works great. A lot of people recommend neem. I'm sure for some of you, neem works great, but in my experience, it's so hot here that any kind of oil-based treatments like neem burn my plants. I have had plants burn. So ever since that happened, I've looked for alternative things like the hydrogen peroxide spray, which to date has not burned my plants. So I can use this year-round. Neem, oil stuff, if you're using horticultural oil sprays for your fruit trees, you got to do that right now during winter, or you only use it right now during winter if you're in a hot climate anyway. So if you're a northern gardener, sure, spray your plants with neem, you're going to be okay. That's just not the case, for us people in the South. So yeah, if you notice some kind of fungus, black spots, whatever, just gently use one of those gentle like leaf, mister bottles, whatever, on your seedlings, and that will kind of help as well. All right. And then, like I said earlier, I had mentioned about fertilizing as soon as the first set of true leaves. I don't have anything with true leaves right now. Well, actually, here's a tomato. I don't know if you guys can even see this on the camera like that, but this little leaf right there, well, I don't think you guys can. You might see that some of these have 3 leaves on there. So it put its first set of 2 leaves, and then its next set of leaves is the true leaves. Actually, here's one right there. I don't even know if the camera can focus on that, but there. So that is a tomato leaf, what I expect, the shape and everything of a tomato leaf. This can now start receiving fertilizer. And fertilizer is going to help your transplants or your seedlings get to that transplant size on time. So again, if you're struggling with, it's 8 weeks and my tomatoes are still too small, try, fertilizing. Pick whatever liquid fertilizer you prefer. Just fertilize it at half of the strength of whatever the directions say. This is Fox Farms Grow Big, but just, use whatever general purpose liquid fertilizer you prefer, and just do half of that. And I do that once a week on Fridays. Fertilizer Fridays is what I call it. So I remember on my seedlings, they grow really fast and get real healthy for me. The light source, I had mentioned this already too. You want to keep the light source 4 inches above your plants at all times. Move it up if you have to once they start getting taller. If you start to see chewed up leaves, I'm sowing seeds outdoors. There are times when a couple worms get in here, even though it's a screen porch. They'll get in here, especially if I'm growing any kind of zucchini, squash. They love to chew the heck out of those crops. Then I use something like BT, which is BT and spinosad are the only two treatments I use for all things worm related. I will start with BT because it's more gentle of the two. They're both considered organic, but BT is more gentle and it doesn't linger on the leaf surfaces as long or last in the environment as long as spinosad does. So I will start with that. I always start with the gentle treatment first before you start getting more aggressive. So that nips it in the butt. It's very effective. So if you have squash plants or whatever, monitor them for the worms because they will come for your seedlings, especially if you're in Florida. Spray with some BT. You should be fine if you start seeing that. And do it early. Don't wait on it. I'll do it tomorrow or something, because those worms, man, they will devour your plant the next day. Like, they're very quick. And you're giving them more time to populate in your garden. They're laying eggs. They're spreading around. So if you want to make less treatments overall or applications overall, spray as soon as you see that damage. Nip it in the butt. Knock that population down. And you'll be much better, and therefore your garden will require less spraying overall. If you're dealing with a more difficult worm, when I say difficult, I mean something like when I grow corn, I always get the corn earworm. They're brown. They have like these little black eyes on them. They're really tough. Okay, they're extra tough. So I like to use spinosad specifically with corn. So that's the only difference there, really. I also want to encourage you, if you really struggle with the worms on your squashes and pumpkins, whatever, or the squash vine borer, stuff like that, focus on the Cucurbita moscata family of pumpkins and squashes, okay? Cucurbita moscata. C. moscata. I have quite a few of them on my website if you want to try growing them, because they are probably one of the most toughest out of all the types of squashes, zucchinis, whatever, that you can grow. Their stems tend to be a little bit more woody, so it's harder for the worms to bore into them. I'm not saying you're not going to get the worms at all. It's not like totally immune to it. It's just those plants take on a lot more damage before you start losing the crop, okay, or the plant starts dying off. So it kind of just increases your chances of success. That's what I'm saying. So some of my favorites, Seminole pumpkin, by far. If you're in Florida and you've never grown Seminole pumpkin, where have you been? Like, you got to get on it. You got to try growing Seminole pumpkin. It's native to Florida, so it does great here. And it is a C. moscata type. The other one is calabaza. My family's from the Dominican Republic. We eat a lot of calabaza squash. It's slightly bigger squash than Seminole pumpkins. Really tough plant as well. There's another category of squashes called I'm going to butcher this name, C. aegypta, something like that. It's like AGYPT something. Those are not well known, but they are even more disease pest resistant. They're beasts. I am growing two of them right now. One is called Sikil, Sikil. It's a squash mainly grown for its pepitas. It's native to South America, grown by like indigenous Indians, Mayans, that kind of thing. So it's native there. It handles the heat, the tropical, all of that. So, and that's even more south than like Florida. So I'm growing that right now as well, and hope to have seeds for that soon. And then I'm growing a second squash that when harvested young, it's like, you can use it like zucchini, like the little round zucchini. That's what it looks like. It's called calabaza criolla, something like that. And so both of those are like super. I'm growing tons of squash right now. They don't have powdery mildew. I can tell you right now. The calabaza criolla leaves are perfectly green. No issues. So I'm really excited to experiment with that. And if it works out great, I will definitely let you all know about it, so you can consider growing those lesser known crops as well that do so well in tropical areas. So yeah, focus on C. moscata if you really struggle, with the squash bugs and all of that kind of thing. Yeah, and that is it, guys. We finished. I don't know how long this has been, an hour and a half or something. I always go over. Let me check these questions one last chance. So if you have any questions really quick, make sure you put it in there. Oh, I got to scroll up and read it. You saw your soil got green in my indoor setup with shop lights. If the surface is turning green, that is one of the various like molds and stuff like that, and you're overwatering or it's not drying out in between watering for sure. So that's an example of that. My seeds are planted. Do I leave it or do I restart? If they die, then restart, but they might survive. I don't know. We don't know. Just let them grow. Get that hydrogen peroxide spray. Spray the surface of the soil, and stop watering it so much, or allow it to dry in between, and see if they recover. If they continue growing, anyways. If they die, then you will have to restart your seeds. But I would at least just see what happens. You've had great success with Seminole pumpkins. Me too. I grow it almost year round here. Every year. This has been like a course. Yeah, I know. I know. But I really love enjoying doing this and sharing all the information that I know. I am not a botanist. I did not go to school for this. I have just been gardening my whole life. Since I was a little kid, I've had a weird fascination with growing things from seed, like always. And I've learned all of this myself, even before internet, gardeners was a thing. I didn't have those resources, like, Epic Gardening, or John Cohen from Growing Your Greens was a huge inspiration to me years ago, because he was like one of the first. And so I really try to think about like you beginners, like what kind of resources I wish I had when I was starting, because it was really hard. I didn't have anyone besides my family, but my family, they're from the Dominican Republic. They had farms there and stuff, and we grow like yucca and pigeon peas and sweet potatoes and all that kind of stuff. But they don't grow all of the like broccolis and all the traditional Americanized food crops, I guess, so to speak, that I like to eat. So I grow it. So I definitely had to learn all of that on my own. And they come here to my house, or they see what I do on the little garden plot I have at my aunt's house, and they're like, I've never seen this before. So I've had to learn a lot on my own, but I love this. I'm researching and reading it all day, every day, and sharing that information with you guys is the most rewarding thing ever, to hear, your successes. If you harvest something, please tag me. I want to see. Like, I love seeing, maybe you struggled with something and all of a sudden it finally worked because of this information. That makes my day. That makes me real happy. So if you post anything on social medias, please tag me. I really want to see, your harvest. And that's it, guys. My voice is even like kind of giving out right now. I hope you guys take advantage. Right now is prime time to be sowing seeds for a lot of things and get an early start on your spring gardens. Spring, in my opinion, if I had to pick spring or fall for Florida gardening wise, spring, in my opinion, is the best. It's our dry season, so the leaf diseases isn't so bad of a problem. And I can control water during the dry season when I water my plants. I can't control it during the fall when we get a hurricane or like this weird weather we've been having now. So if I had to choose one or the other, it would be spring. And also spring is going from cold into the warm temperatures. So the growing season is just lovely. Like the plants love that, as opposed to fall where we're coming out of warmth going into cold. So take advantage. Spring is always like the biggest harvesting period for me ever. And I hope you guys a lot of success. And I'm going to hop off now. Okay. Like I said, I am having a sale on my website, jerasgarden.com. It ends Wednesday. Everything's on sale. All my plants and seeds. So great time to, stock up on the things that you want to grow. And most likely, if I have seeds or plants for it on my website, I probably have a YouTube tutorial to go with it. I think it's, instead of giving you guys instructions, I like to make a video, because I feel like if you see it, it's visual, you learn from that more than reading a piece of paper. So I think that's a powerful combination there. The same stuff that you buy from that website, you have a tutorial to go along with it. So make sure you explore my YouTube channel if you haven't already. You can sit here all day, and I can sit here talking all day, but I can't. I really can't. I still have to cook dinner, and yeah. So anyways, I'm going to hop off now. Take advantage of the sale. Sign up for my email newsletter group on my website. There's an email button, please, because I'm about to go make my email real quick with all of the links to the things mentioned in this class and send it out to everybody. If you missed something, this will be uploaded to my YouTube channel in a few minutes, as with all the other classes that I've been doing as well. So if you missed any of those other classes, you can check them out there. Okay. All right, guys. For real. I got to go now. Bye. Have a great rest of your evening, guys.